Okay, let's turn our attention to the historical context in which Marx is living and writing. And the point to start with is that Marx is writing as capitalism is kind of emerging as the dominant economic order in society. And when Marx looks out his window, he's seeing that capitalism is producing tremendous wealth, kind of wealth beyond what people could have historically imagined. So all this wealth is being generated. And again, kind of maybe contrary to what people's perceptions might be, Marx actually thought the development of capitalism was kind of both good and necessary because of the tremendous increases in productivity it generated, with increasing productivity leading to more goods and more wealth. All right, so Marx thinks that capitalism is a good thing, but it's not the end all be all. It's a necessary condition for what he would argue would be something better. All right. So Marx does give credit, at least to some aspects of capitalism. That being said, when Marx looks out his window, again, he's seeing all this wealth being generated, but a great portion of this wealth is being concentrated into the hands of the few, in particular the factory owners, while the workers, the vast majority of the population, are working extremely long hours and for little pay. So the average person is working a ton at this time, and they're getting meager rewards for it. And um, this situation, again, where all this wealth is being produced, but there's basically this massive poverty. This is kind of the key situation, the key thing that Marx is trying to figure out in his thought. So some of the things that Marx sees when he looks out his window, again, in the lives of the working class, he sees that they're living in basically slums, or people are living in very cramped conditions, in very unsanitary conditions. So there was no sewage at this time. So people would, if they wanted to get rid of their waste, whether it be food waste or other kinds of waste that you can imagine, that would just all be dumped into the streets. Okay. What else is he seeing? He's seeing child labor being used. And then he's also seeing, again, people are working extremely long hours. So there's an entire chapter of capitalism that the focus is on the fight to get the working day down to 10 hours. So 2 hours beyond what we consider it to be. And they were trying to bring it down from 16 or 14 hours per week. So for many people of the working class, they're working these long hours and then they're living in these kind of conditions and just kind of like on the edge of existence. And so when Marx looks out his window, he sees these two things. He's seeing wealth on the one hand and this poverty on the other. His theory, right, his idea is that these two things are fundamentally linked. The wealth of some is coming from the poverty and the immiseration of the many. And this is the great debate that exists between Marxist economists and more mainstream economists. Everyone agrees that these conditions existed at this time. The question is, are these conditions the rule or are they the exception? Marx would say if you let capitalism run on its own, you're going to get situations like this. This is its natural tendency, where for wealth, lots of wealth to be generated, but to be heavily concentrated in the hands of the few, leaving just breadcrumbs at best for everyone else. If you're more a mainstream economist, what you're going to argue is that this was the exceptional circumstance, And the reason why working conditions were so poor at this time was because there was just a flood of workers. So there was a ton of workers, not that many jobs. That meant that the price of labor is going to fall basically to rock bottom. And that situation occurred. But once capitalism and industry started growing more, it was able to fully absorb those who wanted to work. And once that happened, working conditions and living conditions improved. And then, eventually we get to the birth of the middle class and those and related things. So, are these conditions the exception or the rule? If you say the exception, again, you're kind of a mainstream economist. If you say these are the rule, and we only get, say, the formation of the middle class during exceptional circumstances, say after World War II, when the U.S. was the main producer left around because all the other main industrial economies were bombed during the war. Uh, and so that was an exceptional circumstance that allowed the middle class to develop. And then once that happens, we see, say, economic inequality increase since the 1970s. Then you're of a more Marxist orientation. All right. Next, we'll take on the issue of class and the role that it plays in Marxist thought.